This country been run by a brother goats, the greediest of all time. They have all a self and none of the mentality. The chorus is bunch of pigs and goats running this day. And the latest deception and betrayal is really cause for alarm. They're the greediest of all time. It is plain to see the true gang and give a damn about you and me. Even big supporters crying fall and shame at all these comrades dirty in the Labour Party name. Don't business about that as long as they pocket fat. Too bad who don't agree. The good them say it's all about me. That's the chorus. Who is the nanny gate liar? Who don't spin doctor? Men. Whose sole agenda is to make themselves richer and the poor harder. They say I know that I greedy, but I beg you don't watch me stop being hateful. Instead just be grateful. All the good them say it's all about me. That's the slogan. The big salary increase is just the latest injustice to be imposed on the people by these blundering misfits. They're selfish and greedy with no love for the needy. Malicious and runways make the thing ain't got no taste. Disrespectful and pompous, arrogant and self-righteous. These goats too brave and bold, ain't got no heart, no soul. They fed on their own nest, we not a care for the rest. They say it's all about me. That's the goat, them mantra. Who want the whole hog treating poor people like dog, men. Who keep flying high in style, leaving our sons here to die, men. Who take the pepper, the pop and the laugh, the peace, men. Enough talking about lift and elevate, just words and promises but no relief. Who lacking empathy, compassion, humility, Who think that shame, lame, rename is a sustainable strategy? Here the goat them men. But woe be unto these ghosts and vampires. Fake Ecclesiastes 5 verse 10 says, whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. Firstly, a grievous evil under the sun. Wealth brought into the harm of its owners. Lost to misfortune so that their children have nothing to inherit. So let them carry on, God don't like ugly. Who playing, who fooling, who since June 2022, men. Who do the big bet and switch, divide the poor and the rich, men. Who raking in bigly while so many going hungry, Who are disgrace of behind blood sucking parasite, a bunch of termites, headed more them, We love to serve our country that God has blessed so well. In peace and love and happiness, we will forever dwell. We ask for God's protection and guidance on our way. The People's Action Movement will strive from day to day. The People's Action Movement is here and here to stay.
Hello everyone, welcome to edition number 7 of Perspectives. This is a 1-hour Facebook and YouTube live series brought to you by the People's Action Movement, a political party on St. Kitts and Nevis. We are so happy that you have joined us for this edition. We know that there's a buzz now about this program, and tonight's program will be no exception, we promise. I want you to help me welcome our esteemed leader of the political party called PAM, the People's Action Movement. He is a newly minted PhD graduate, and we are so happy that he can join us. We suspect that he has his hands full now with calls because obviously everybody is excited to talk to him about this creative leadership doctoral degree that he just obtained. And so we got him before you because he's one of us. But you're part of us too. So in time we'll share him with you. So we want you to sit tonight and follow this conversation because really this is a conversation that is long overdue. And not so much so because of our political leaders, recent graduation, but the subject matter, creative leadership in government. And especially when we look at what is happening now in the context of St. Kitts and Nevis, we see indeed that if ever there was a time when creative leadership is required, is now. And so we hope that you enjoy the conversation. We want you to engage on the live, and obviously we're going to go back and look at your suggestions, and we want you to take notes if you will. So help me welcome again our political leader, the Honorable Dr. Shawn Richards. Welcome to Perspectives, Dr. Richards.
Thank you, Laverne. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here on Perspective this evening. I look forward to the conversation. I look forward to all of the feedback that we will receive from persons. You indicated that creative leadership is needed within government. I certainly agree with you. And government is about the people. It is not about the ministers of government. And so in terms of creative leadership, how do we utilize creative leadership within government to ensure that we bring solutions, we bring innovations to solve the issues affecting the citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis?
Well, thank you for that apt opening statement. And let's jump right in. So I want you to share with us, for the benefit of all who are listening now and who would listen subsequently, what was the essence of your doctoral dissertation?
Okay. The topic of my doctoral dissertation was an exploration of the influence of creative leadership, citizen engagement, and psychological safety on organizational change within gangs through the St. Kitts Nevis Alternative Lifestyle Pathway Program, commonly referred to as the PEACE Program. It was a case study and it employed a qualitative research framework.
All right. So you clearly did well because you have now added the letters PhD to your name. And so what, in a synopsis, can you share with us were the key findings about that program? And especially in the context where there seem to have been so many misgivings, so many misinterpretations, so many perhaps ill will where the program is concerned. And maybe it came from a position of ignorance. And, if information is lacking and people are ignorant, perhaps you have to forgive them. So just share with us some of the key findings.
Okay. Let me start by saying that the research concluded that in terms of creative leadership, psychological safety, and citizen engagement, indeed, those particular factors influence organizational change within gangs. Now, perhaps persons may wonder specifically what is creative leadership, what is citizen engagement, and what is psychological safety. So let me sort of back up and perhaps provide some context in terms of those. And maybe too I should look at organizational change. What is organizational change? And I'll give you some of the definitions that I came across while doing the research. Organizational change, for example, is it is how you see an organizational change in terms of how the organization embraces novel concepts and attitudes by member of an organization. And you had one particular person, Duff, who defined it that way. You had Burke, 2018, who said, it bears a resemblance, he said it focuses on three elements: the movement of the organization away from its current direction, equipping its members with a new sense of imagination, and a radical change in its modus operandi. Flovic et al. 2019 amplified that particular view by Burke and stated that it is basically the underlying mechanisms, programs, plans, practices, and norms within the organization and how those are changed. And so they look at the how and the what aspect of the changes. So when you begin to look at organizational change, the attitudes, the beliefs, the behaviors, the way you go about doing things within an organization, how do you go about changes those things, or what changes have taken place? So that's organizational change. Now, when you begin to look at creative leadership, on the other hand, creative leadership basically looks at how you have a vision. And so how do you motivate persons towards achieving that particular vision that you have? And clearly, in terms of the peace program, there was a vision in terms of changing gang members, changing how the organization, the gangs operate. And so creative leadership, and you have had several different definitions by several persons. One of the persons, for example, you have who gave a definition is Puccio et al. And the definition advanced by Puccio states that creative leadership is the ability to deliberately engage one's imagination to define and guide a group towards a goal. The direction is new for the group. Creative leaders have a profoundly positive influence on the individuals in a situation. You had TISI 2012 who advises that within organizations, the fundamentals of creative leadership involve changing the organization to actualize novelty, something new, forming consensus around a shared vision, motivating and allowing the creative talents of others, and importantly, stirring and carefully strategizing to bring out the full creativity of followers. And so again, you recognize that if you look at it in the context of organizational change within gangs, you have that vision. These are the changes that you want to see. How do you bring about something new? How do you motivate the followers within the several different gangs to actualize the changes that you want to see? If we go to citizen engagement basically is about a collaboration between government, the citizens, in particular the stakeholders. The stakeholders are important because if the stakeholders do not embrace change, you're going to have resistance, and that could be detrimental. So citizen engagement is that collaboration between government, citizens, and in particular stakeholders to help the government to find solutions to pressing issues, pressing problems. Psychological safety is more about a group sort of context. You and several persons are in a group. While within that group, do you feel safe to share your ideas? Do you feel safe to ask for feedback? Do you feel that you're going to be criticized? Do you feel that you're going to be penalized? If you make a mistake, for example, are you penalized for making the mistake? Somebody in the group is different. How are those persons treated? Do you tolerate them for being different? You and I, we have different skills. We have different ideas. We have different talents. Do you utilize the skills and the talents of the persons within the group? And so that is basically what psychological safety is about. Because if persons do not feel safe within a group to ask questions, to seek feedback, to take a risk, to make mistake, they don't feel that other persons are being tolerant of them, it is going to stifle creativity. Because persons will not share their ideas. Persons will not take risk. And a lot of times, when you develop solutions to issues, it is because somebody had basically the safety to go out there and take the risk to actually go out and experiment. And sometimes it is that when you're doing creative problem solving, you're sharing ideas, and you may feel that the idea coming from this particular person is not a good idea, or you don't want to hear from that person because you don't value the skills and the talents of that person. But when it comes to creativity, they tell you to defer judgment. You know, and so you and I are sitting down and the other persons within the group, and we're basically just sharing ideas. And after we would have shared our ideas, we go back and we look at each one, because maybe initially it might have sounded like, well, this can't work. But when you go back now and you begin to flesh them out, you realize, okay, this perhaps is an idea that we could work with. And how then now do we bring innovation to the particular issue that you have using the idea which came out? Or it might be a combination of different ideas. So that is why they say, for example, defer judgment. Because initially it may not sound like a good idea to you, but you never give it a chance. So I think I needed to first explain those particular concepts. So yes, the research concluded that they made a positive influence in terms of organizational change within gangs. It was felt by a majority of the participants that the persons who were involved in the peace program, the gang members, for example, they still continue to live a positive lifestyle, the majority of them. So you had that coming out. One of the important things coming out is the freedom of movement. They felt like they were trapped before within their communities. They couldn't visit family members. They couldn't visit children, for example. They couldn't go beyond their communities to explore employment opportunities, etc. And because of the peace program, they were able to basically go beyond what became like a prison wall for them within their own communities. It also came out that they felt shunned by the community members. The community members saw them as persons who are gang members, and so they labeled them as gang members. And they were quite blunt about it. They said, for example, that I live in the community, Laverne, you don't like me, you have labeled me as a gang member, and if I have to rob Laverne today in order to survive, I am going to rob you. You don't like me, I don't like you. The only persons I'm concerned about would be my gang members. I gave this example on Win FM also this morning. One gang member said to me that if you had a birthday party and you invited me to the birthday party, I came to the birthday party, a rival gang member is there, I'll mash up your birthday party and have an altercation with the rival gang member. I don't care about anyone else.
Time and place doesn't matter.
I don't care. I don't care who's having the party. My only concern is that this rival is there, and that is all I'm thinking. The only persons who are there who would matter to me would be my fellow gang members. No one else. So you had that coming out of it. But after they would have gone through the peace program, they said the community developed an appreciation, began developing an appreciation for them. Likewise, they developed an appreciation for the community to the extent that they became guardians of the community. They began doing different projects in the community. They began looking up to persons within the community. And basically, those persons became like role models for them. So that was one of the important changes that they noted. They felt like they were out of the mainstream of society prior to the peace program. Some of them became entrepreneurs. Some are now married. Some basically leading positive lifestyle, employed by persons within the private sector, etc. So they noted
so that discrimination ideology probably went away.
Yes.
Because now they have been incorporated into the society and feel like one of us, like any other citizen.
They feel like a normal citizen. Because one of the persons pointed out, and it wasn't just gang members who I interviewed, you had gang members. 3 from St. Kitts, 2 from Nevis who were interviewed. You had persons who were part of the citizen engagement, our initial engagement team, 2 from St. Kitts, 2 from Nevis. And you also had persons who were in the leadership aspect of the program who you also interviewed. So you had diverse perspectives coming from the different persons. So one person said from the leadership team, for example, that the gang members felt as though they were outside of the mainstream of society. Some of them never had a bank account, never had a social security card, never paid a water bill, never paid an electricity bill. So they didn't feel like normal members of society. And so when you began to normalize those particular aspects of life for them, then some of them began feeling, hey, I'm a regular person within society. They also felt that there was an erosion of power, especially amongst the leadership within the gangs, because previously the gang members would have depended on the leaders, whether it is for financial support, etc.
So it was neutralized. Everybody
it's neutralized because you're now part of the peace program, you're working your own money.
Yeah.
I don't need to depend on you. Some of them got loans, etc., to start businesses. So I don't need to depend on you. It weakened the leadership structure.
I want to ask you a question, and maybe you don't even know what the answer is. But here, when you say all of this, it makes me wonder, and I'm sure as you continue to share those interesting findings, I'm sure people would wonder similarly, whether or not in transitioning or renaming or whatever you want to call what happened, because we're now at Elevate, if consideration was given to drilling down, interviewing, communicating, talking to some of these same people to make sure that you weren't veering too far away from what it is they say worked for them. Because clearly, if it is a program that was meant to change them and to work for them, they really ought to be front and center of the discussion in terms of what it is could benefit them.
Okay. And I don't get the impression that has actually taken place. One person who I interviewed, for example, said, and let me not say one because it came out from several persons, but you would have gotten different aspects of it, that the peace program was basically a 24-hour program, especially for the citizens who were involved in it. They said, for example, that...
And by citizens, you mean those people who are in part of the administration structure?
No, these were citizens who were incorporated into the program. You had counselors, you had pastors, you had teachers, etc.
Yeah.
And one of the things which I was able to learn, as I said, it was a 24-hour program. You and I are in rival gangs. We have a conflict. And rather than them resorting to firearms and guns, etc., to deal with it, they develop trust within the persons in the program, and so they would say to them, look, there's a conflict, we need mediation. And they said sometimes 2-3 o'clock in the morning, they would be involved in mediation to bring an end to possible feuds. And so that you possibly could have had more issues of violence if it hadn't been for that. They also stated that because some of the gang members were part of these mediation efforts, they themselves became mediators. So that rather than having to call them, they were mediating issues amongst themselves and amongst other gangs, and you actually got that from gang members. They spoke about it. For them, it was something, an important change that they went through. They developed trust for the police. They said prior to, they looked at the police as just somebody there who wants to
come at them,
to lock them up. But they developed such a relationship with the police that they began sharing information with the police. Look, instead of concentrating on this area, concentrate on that area. There was a question, for example, asking if you ever have an issue with crime and gang violence, who would you feel comfortable speaking to? And interestingly, I think a majority of participants said law enforcement officers.
Wow.
And that was because they developed that level of trust and confidence in police officers because of the program. prior to, they saw the police as being the enemy. And so I think it is all of that. In answering the question that you asked, it is all of those things which were part of the peace program, which, from what I've gathered, those things have not been incorporated into the Elevate program, whether it is the mediation, sitting down with the police. They used to have regular meetings, they said. Whether it is once a week or twice a week, they had meetings with the different participants. So whether the gang members, the leadership team, the persons from the engagement team. And that way also they were able to share ideas, what it is, we can do differently. And so it is easier for you to embrace something if you're part of the coming up with the solutions to it. And so you had all of that. Now, well, Azad, for example, on a program that I was on this morning, said that he was at a meeting recently and the gang members were saying they feel now like they're more in a classroom undergoing training rather than anything else. So those are the critical aspects of it appear to be missing in terms of the regular meetings, in terms of the citizens meeting with them, in terms of the mediation and all these sort of things. I don't get the impression that those things have been implemented or incorporated into the Elevate program. Now, don't get me wrong, because they also had criticisms about the peace program coming from the different participants in the study. One person, for example, from the citizen engagement team, the IET team, said, look, on paper, the peace program was perfect. However, that participant felt that there was not enough of a focus on the psychological aspect of it. The person said that it is their view that a large part of the focus was in terms of reducing crime and the statistics. And so the program was a new program, it was a novel program, and as time went along, they recognized that there are certain changes, certain reforms which were needed, which were not implemented. So you had that one.
When did the program start? Because it's certainly
2019.
2019. Okay, so it probably had a good run of maybe say 3 years.
Yes.
And 3 years is not a, I don't know, it's not a, 3 years is a reasonable time, but it's not the best time to benchmark a product?
No, as a matter of fact, when you look at other studies, the other studies would indicate that you need to give a program such like that 3, 4, 5 years before you really could do a proper assessment of the program. So you had that. You had one gang member who said, hey, look, no social security deductions were being made on my behalf. And so if I needed to go to social security to make a claim, of course I would be affected. So you had that coming out. One person, he said, look, I feel that in 2022 in particular, the program was becoming politicized. So you had that aspect of it. So you had criticisms of the program, genuine criticisms. But it doesn't mean that because you have certain criticisms, certain issues with it, that you just wholesale
try it through
the door. Look at what were the positives and how do you incorporate the positives into a new program. And I declared in my study that, look, I was part of the cabinet of ministers which implemented the peace program, but I ensured that the program was carefully designed to ensure that there was no bias coming from me. As a matter of fact, let me state that you have what you call the IRB committee at your VIE. And so your first 3 chapters, you have, before you could actually go out and do any research, you have to submit your proposal to IRB and get permission from IRB to proceed with the actual study. And so all of those things would have been declared, especially in chapters 1 and chapter 3. So chapters 1 and 3. But they were able to look at the study, they were able to look at the interview questions, etc., so that they felt confident. And even in terms of analyzing the results which I received, I had an independent person who would have coded them to ensure that my coding was correct, my results are correct, and I also use a software by the name of NVivo to also do coding.
Okay.
So that I don't want anybody to be able to say
There was bias.
I was biased. And so the findings are reported as they were. If you read the study, you would see the direct quotations in there from persons who participated in the study.
Okay. So in summation, clearly the peace program was not perfect. And I don't think there's any perfect program anywhere in the world. But it did, in the short lifespan that it had, make a significant dent in the number of homicides that we had. And although you say somebody said that that was too strong a focus, I think for Citizen Jane and Citizen Mary and Citizen John, they were happy at the end of the day that we were not waking up every morning to hear in the news that somebody had been killed. Now, with all of its imperfection, as I just said, clearly a lot of work was being put into it. There were people who committed themselves to making sure it worked. I, as part of a member of my Rotary Club, the Rotary Club of Lyamega, benefited from a presentation of Major Saunders, I think he was, the Jamaican advisor who was working at that time with government, and we were very intrigued by his presentation in terms of what some of the responsibilities were for the people who are in administration with respect to the program. And just like you said, being on 24-hour call, he made mention of things like that. So having said all of that and knowing how far you reached out and the depth with which your study touched all of these different stakeholders, let's now just listen to this comment that was recently made last week in Parliament by the Prime Minister.
So that is why I said this was a criminal enterprise sponsored by the government, Madam Speaker.
And that comment, Dr. Richards, was made in response or as a description of the peace program. I want you to unbiasedly comment about that program against the backdrop of what you just said about all the stakeholders and the 24-hour interventions and all of that.
I think it's really an unfortunate statement, because if it is that there were aspects of the program that you have an issue with, you don't label the entire program as being a criminal enterprise. What are you saying to some of the citizens who were involved in the program? That they were part of a criminal enterprise? Persons who were out there genuinely trying to get gang members to change. The teachers, the counselors, the pastors, the businessmen, etc., who invested their time into this program. You're saying to them they were part of a criminal enterprise. What are you saying to the gang members who have made a genuine effort to change? That even though you had a program in place that they asked for to move them away from gangs, to effect change within gangs, that they were part of a criminal enterprise? When you look at the psyche that you're creating within those persons, it is an unfortunate statement. Very, very unfortunate. And I think the Prime Minister perhaps he needs to reflect on what he said and come back and say, hey, look, maybe in terms of this aspect of the program, we had issues with it. But as I said, the persons who were involved in the program, what are you saying about them? That they were part of a criminal enterprise? What about the positive effects that you saw coming out of the program? The gang members, and you could look around within all of the different communities and see persons who have changed. There's some gang members who have vowed since the program, I ain't going back in town, I ain't going back in that life. I don't want to be in jail. I don't want to have anything to do with that particular lifestyle. One said, for example, for me it is now to concentrate on my business. A number of them said, They now want to be able to speak to younger persons and say to younger persons, look, there really isn't anything attractive about crime and gang violence. One said, look, I used to do it basically for what? To get props from my other gang members. So apart from that, there really wasn't anything else in it. Maybe a little financial gain. At times, your gang members say, boy, you dog, you bad. But he said, apart from that, in reflection, there really isn't anything attractive about it. One said, look, if you're going to have the peace program again, I think persons like me who have changed, it should be used to say to other persons that I have done it. You too, you can do it. Use them now to motivate other persons to move away from that particular lifestyle.
The government may take them up on that. Who knows? But it would be good if there could be a face or faces of the program, and use them to motivate people away from that kind of lifestyle. But I don't want us to spend the whole show talking about that, because that really was just one aspect of creative leadership in government, and I want us to look more broadly now, and it could very well be other social programs where the government, like you say, I mean, citizen engagement, and it's unfortunate that comment was made given the number of stakeholders that were involved, and I hope that this now does not make people become reluctant in engaging in programs that could subsequently be spun into a political something, and then they have to wear these labels. I was reading, for instance, something that is called a social impact bond, and this is where the government engage the private sector to invest in some sort of social program to address a social challenge, and if they're successful in doing that, then the government actually repays them back based on the success. And I'm thinking that since we're talking about creative government and creative governance, maybe that is a path that can be taken for some of the social challenge that we have, so that you allow your people, you spoke about citizenship engagement, you allow people to come together, and maybe we'll leave government of some of the things that, because sometimes people think that the government, their hand is in everything, and maybe if they step back and allow people to be innovative and to think outside the box and to do these things, we all happy people buy into the programs and the benefits, and I think the country will be the better for it. I don't know what you think about ideas like those.
I agree with you. Let me say to you that quite often we go about finding solutions to what really isn't the issue. We have a
That's
problem.
very interesting.
Yes, no, but when you begin to look at it, and that is why you have creative problem solving, because in many instances we think this is the particular issue when that isn't the issue, and so if you focus on the wrong issue, the problem is going to continue to resurface. Let me give you a real example. The water situation. You keep hearing the problem is climate change, we are getting less rainfall. And maybe when you begin to drill down, that really isn't the problem. Because you could have had the climate could have remained the same, but you still very well have an issue with a shortage of water. Because you have more businesses. You have more persons building. We haven't been building with cisterns, etc. You have more houses than you would have had years ago. You have, so more businesses, more houses. So you have more hotels. So you have a greater need now in terms of water. The demand is greater. Has the supply increased? No. And maybe when you begin to drill down, and we had begun doing an exercise like that at the water department, basically the issue is you haven't developed the infrastructure to meet demand. So now that you're speaking about your desalination plant and additional wells and all that sort of stuff, now you begin to look at, well, what is the issue? What is the real issue? And that really is the issue. We haven't kept abreast of meeting the demand. Now, if you're going to say, well, the issue is climate change, then you might say, well, how are we going to change the climate? Can you really change it? What is the real issue that you need to address? And that is part of the creative problem-solving process. You need to identify what really is the issue. If Shawn and somebody isn't getting along and you feel that the issue is, well, Shawn just can't get along with people. But then when you begin to drill down, you might find that that ain't the issue, you know. The issue is different. And so now you need to address that particular issue. Otherwise, the problem is going to keep, as I said, happening over and over and over again. So in terms of government, yes, you need creativity within government. You need creative leadership within government. And as I said to you, creative leadership is about you having a vision and how do you motivate other persons in terms of achieving that particular vision. And the research also says that you have to sometimes throw the organization into a state of chaos. Because as you're in the process of change, you're going to have some chaos within the organization. But you know what that vision is, and you want to bring about change within government. And government has so many different issues that you can employ creative problem solving to bring about solutions to those issues. Sometimes it's not about just taking money and feel that, well, I have to spend some money to fix this and spend some money to fix that. But what is the real issue, and how do we go about solving the issue?
But question, does it always have to be about government though? Because using this example, I mean,
no.
Is there too much of a reliance on government? Can government use the same creative leadership and innovative solving dynamic to say, look, I want to engage my citizens, and this is the solution I'm looking for, and just let people run with these things?
And that is why part of my research was about citizen engagement. Because as I said to you, the stakeholders must be a critical part of it. Because even if as a government, you come up with a particular solution and the citizens don't buy into it, the stakeholders don't buy into it, you're going to have resistance to change. And so you may have wasted money because citizens, they did not buy into it, they weren't part of it. You also need to recognize that within government, you have particular skill sets, you have particular talents. But likewise, outside of the realm of government, within the private sector, you have persons with also their own skill sets, their own talents. And so how do you bring all of those skills and all of those talents together to find solutions to issues?
I want to ask you a question. You spent about 7 years in government, from 2015 to 2022. And so you have a good feel of, you know, some of the departments, the functionaries, the functioning of some of these ministries and all of that. Do you think that there are some areas in government that could be divested out of government?
I strongly believe so, that there are quite a few areas that you can divest.
Anything come to the top of your mind?
When I was Minister of Education, for example, I felt that schools meals and some of these other programs, that you could divest them from government. You could give private citizens these particular services to run. You empower them, they start a business, they do the catering, they hire persons. It saves the government in terms of having to maintain the school's meals kitchen, the vehicles, pay social security, pay insurance, and all these sort of things. And I think it's done similar to that in Nevis. I don't think it's really the government itself who operates the program, but you have different persons within the different schools. Some of the high schools here, for example, they have canteens, and those canteens are operated by private citizens. So you have that. Water services, I also believe that we needed to take a critical look at it in terms of should the government divest of it? Yes, one may argue that it could become a statutory body, such as the electricity, etc. But even in terms of some of these statutory bodies, I don't think that they are as creative as they ought to be. And I suppose part of it is when you have government owning 100% of the shares in these statutory corporations, they still report
Operate
back.
like a government entity.
And the government, to a large extent, still continues to subsidize them.
What about healthcare, though? Is there any opportunity to privatize healthcare? I know the conversation is that if you do that, the service will become a lot more expensive and maybe out of the reach of the working class. But surely I'm just thinking that if in the context of creative leadership, the government really needs to relieve itself of a lot of these things for the sake of efficiency and cost savings, and then maybe use those cost savings to apply to something else that maybe is in more demand or is probably a little bit more expensive for the ordinary man and woman. But I believe that this degree that you just got is going to spur a lot of conversation. And I know when I called you, you said it's one of those high demand degrees now, and I really hope that government could begin to tell our young people, to go and study these things. We have enough doctors and lawyers. No disrespect to doctors and lawyers. No disrespect. I live above the law. I try to walk on the straight and the narrow, but obviously you do get sick. You may not always need a lawyer, but you always need a doctor. And so I think that in the discussion about creative leadership in government, I think there also must be an assessment. There also must be a needs assessment of what is required in terms of the technical and other skills to drive creativity and to modernize and progress our country.
And let me say that creativity can be taught. Buffalo State, for example, which my program was in collaboration with, has a creativity program there. And so you could teach persons in terms of creating problem solving how to become more adept at it. So that's one. Now, the particular program that I did, and I'm going to say this to get to your question about healthcare, for example. One of the tracks, there are 3 tracks at UVI, and one of the tracks is educational leadership for change. And so that in itself says to you that in terms of your education sector, persons now can go pursue that particular degree. And how do you effect creative leadership and change within the education sector? And it doesn't mean that in terms of government is no longer involved in education. But how do you get your leaders within the school to become more creative in terms of effecting changes within the schools, finding solutions to issues within the school? And so similarly, within healthcare, that can be used. Now, it doesn't mean that government has to divest of everything within the healthcare sector, but there might be some things within the healthcare sector that perhaps can be done differently. You have some problems. How do we go about finding creative solutions? How do we go about coming up with innovations to address those particular issues? How do we come up with something new, something different that is going to add value to the end users of the product? Case studies, for example, are often employed in the healthcare sector because as you begin to look at processes, etc., how do you go about changing certain processes? And so by studying perhaps what is currently happening, you are able then to find innovative solutions to some of the processes. So not necessarily that you may divest of health care, but in terms of creativity, how do you use it to ensure that you get a more efficient service, that you get a more effective service, that the service becomes more economical to the end users of the program? How do you get value for money?
Yeah.
You're building a new hospital, but again, okay, you're building it, and one of the reasons I've heard is because again of climate change and resistance to hurricanes, etc. But that isn't necessarily the complaint that you hear from persons who utilize
So you're
the
not addressing the
services at the
problem.
hospital. So while you may addressing what you think is one problem in terms of the infrastructure, if you move persons there, same service, same processes, etc., you're still going to have complaints.
There's still inefficiency.
You're still inefficiency, and so how do you creatively solve those particular issues that you have and bring innovation into some of these processes?
Yeah, I like that example, and let's even look at the college. We've been hearing now a lot about I think there's a robotics society there. Our young people have gone abroad and competed and have acquitted themselves fairly well, really well for a small jurisdiction. And I'm thinking, has the government ever maybe challenged them to do something with that skill, to bring efficiency to something in government? I mean, if in fact we're talking about creative leadership, it requires out-of-the-box thinking. So here we have a cadre of young people who are using skills in IT and robotics to do all of these things. And we're not hearing that the government is even thinking of utilizing this particular skill in any area of government.
And that again is unfortunate because again you have young persons, and these are persons you said are involved in robotics. They have participated in competitions. How do you now utilize that skill set in terms of bringing about solutions to some of the issues that you have? And we need really to invest more in terms of creative leadership, in terms of empowering citizens to be part of that process, coming up with solutions to issues. UVI, I think, has now created what you call a creativity lab. And so persons can now go to that lab, and so you begin to engage in different creative ideas, different creative solutions, etc. I think, for the most part, sometimes when we think about creativity and we think about innovation, we think about the private sector.
Yeah. We never see government as leading in those areas.
We never see government as leading in those areas.
But that has to change.
But that has to change. And the research also shows that you have a number of countries which have been able to basically begin now to become more innovative, involving citizens, getting persons to think in terms of creative problem solving, and how do we come up with innovative products, how do we come up with novel ideas to deal with some of the very pressing issues that we have. I think in chapter 1, for example, I pointed out that it really has become incumbent upon governments to become more creative and to use more innovation because of what is referred to as vexing issues: healthcare, an aging society, climate change, crime and violence. These are some of the vexing issues which the research referred to and indicated that governments need to become more innovative in solving some of these issues.
As you were talking, Dr. Richards, I like the sound of it, so Shawn is through the door, about the fact that UVI has labs. I am also thinking that, a few years ago, I think I heard a news item where the cable rolled out internet across all of the community centers. I think there were about 17 community centers, could be more. The idea being that young people really should have been swarming these community centers and perhaps utilizing the technology to create products and create services and really begin to monetize those kind of skills. But when sometimes I randomly check with people who live in some of these communities, and they would say to you that the community centers are not open, or when they're open, you have to go to somebody who is maybe some political figure in the community, and there's no guarantee you may even get access to the center. So here it is that on the one hand, our corporate citizens saw that it made sense to try to expand and give access to that kind of thing, and then nothing has happened.
Okay. And before said that, for example, I have as part of the research that Johnson et al. 2017 and Arundel et al. 2019 support this stance by noting in their research the increased expectation from citizens for more innovation from the public sector to confront pressing social issues and their corollary challenges. Their suggestions for innovation range from ensuring a more efficient distribution of resources to designing policies and programs primarily geared towards satisfying constituent needs. Government, they contend, has the economic power and resources to do so. So you mentioned the community centers. So it's not even just about the community centers and giving persons access to them, but also providing them persons with the necessary resources to engage in creative problem solving.
But is there will to do that?
I don't get the impression that there's a will.
I am listening to this conversation in the back of my mind. I'm thinking, because obviously this is a political show, and I am thinking that I hope that we are taking notes as a political party who is waiting to get into government, so that we could learn our own lessons, because the People's Action Movement cannot go back into government with the same old. Thankfully, whether you continue in a political career or not, we'll always have you. You don't have any place to go. So we're laying claim to you now, maybe even in an advisory capacity, but really I think it may take a People's Action Movement government to lead the charge in creative leadership in government. And I can't wait for that to happen, because I think the time is right and the timing is ripe for that to happen.
And I agree with you. It's not going to change overnight, because we have a political culture here where you support this political party, you support that political party, and so in terms of what you have to offer, you don't have anything to offer.
50% capacity.
Right.
Every 5
and
years.
As I said, you need to recognize that we all have different skills, we have different talents, we have different experiences. And so how do you harness those for the good of the country in terms of bringing about innovation to a number of the issues plaguing the country? So you have that aspect of it, and we need to address that. We need to begin the process, even within government departments and ministries, to engage in that sort of creating problem solving. I mean, too often, and I was a minister, so I am aware of it, and I have been guilty of it. You sit down with maybe one or two persons and you say, this is what the problem is, and okay, I think, well, this is the solution to the problem. And a year, 2 years later, the same problem is still there. Because
it comes back full circle.
It comes back full circle. Take the schools, for example. You're the Minister of Education, and there's a problem within the schools. You don't call in the teachers, you don't call in the students to be part of the creative problem-solving process. You sit down with one or two persons in the ministry and you say, well, okay, I think this is the solution to the problem. You ain't in the school, you know. You ain't the one who will have to implement the change. And so there's no buy-in from the teachers, there's no buy-in from the administration, there's no buy-in from the students. And maybe if it is that you speak with them, you get a totally different perspective as to what the issue is and possible solutions to the problem. Part of it too is we feel we have to please our constituents only. And so those who support me, they say, well, do this. And so you do it. And then you also have the other aspect of it. You feel that because you're the government, you're giving up some of your power, some of your authority, because you now allow citizens to come in
Yes.
and to be part of the process. But you aren't necessarily giving up your power or giving up your authority, because at the end of it, you still have to implement whatever it is. But at
You're
least you
creating
know
efficiency as well. And what is wrong
exactly.
with that?
And at
Any
least
government you can do that will get props.
you will get props, and persons will feel more comfortable that the government is listening to them. They will feel, in terms of implementing the solution, that hey, I was part of it.
Yes.
I think there was an example, for example, in terms of one of the Asian countries and the usage of electricity, and the issue was surrounding, I think they needed to, you had a time of the day when you had a peak demand. And so how do you get to reduce that demand during that time of the day? And so they involve the citizens. And by involving the citizens, the behavior, the consumption behavior of the citizens change, because they were part of the solution to the problem. And so you may feel that, well, okay, I need to go and buy more generators. But by changing behaviors in terms of consumption, maybe you need to buy more generators still. But in terms of the quantum that you need to buy, you don't need to buy that quantum. So again, you see how you're able to come up with solutions because of that engagement with citizens.
Yeah. Well, the time is fast spent. It's amazing how time runs. You can't really do justice to this in an hour. And so you're free to come back anytime to learn to share some more, because as I said, there's some degree of novelty about your degree, and don't be surprised that you're going to be in high demand, because people want to hear more. And as I said, I didn't necessarily want to limit it to the peace program, because creativity is creativity. And you've made some really good points, and I hope that somebody's watching, but if they don't do it now, we'll do it in 2027, because we really can't go along doing the same things in the same way. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to put a wrap to your presentation.
Thank you. And in putting a wrap, let me say that I am aware that the leader of the NRP in Nevis did the very same program. The current president for CFBC is also involved in the program now, pursuing a degree with UVI. So hopefully you would have more and more persons availing themselves to that particular field of study. It has been my pleasure to be here. I am open to have a discussion with anyone who wants to have, whether it is to discuss the research or even in terms of creating problem solving and how we can go about here in St. Kitts employing creative problem solving on a greater scale to bring innovation to some of the pressing issues that we have in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. This study wasn't necessarily just for the benefit of Shawn Richards, but you live in a society, and so how do you then use the study to help to bring about change within the society?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Richards. That does have a ring to it. We hope to see you back here next Thursday, same time, same place. And don't forget to share the live when you do come on. We are reminding you that this program is brought to you with the kind support of viewers and listeners and members and friends all across St. Kitts and Nevis and the diaspora. If you want to donate to keep seeing this program, to make this program maybe even expand, because we're seeing requests for people, from people asking to make it maybe another half hour. So clearly it costs to produce this show. So if you're so minded, you can give your donation. Just put it in an envelope, mark it Perspective, and drop it off at our secretariat on Saturdays between the hour of 10 to 2 p.m. and we'll be happy to expand our show or bring more presenters or maybe even do it twice a week. So thank you so much for viewing. We'll see you again next Thursday for another edition of Perspectives. Thank you so much.
Love to serve our country that God has blessed so well. In peace and love and happiness, we will forever dwell. We ask for God's protection and guidance on our way. The People's Action Movement will strive from day to day. The People's Action Movement is here and here to stay. We love to serve our country that God has blessed so well. In peace and love and happiness, we will forever dwell. This country been run by our brother goats, the greediest of all time. They have all a self and none of the mentality. The chorus is bunch of pigs and goats running this day, and the latest deception and betrayal is really cause for alarm. They're the greediest of all time. It is plain to see the true gang and give a damn about you and me. Even big supporters crying foul and shame at how these comrades dirty in the Labour Party name. Don't business about that as long as they pocket fat. Too bad you don't agree. The goat them say it's all about me. That's the chorus. Who is the nanny gate liar? Who talks spin doctor? Men, whose sole agenda is to make themselves richer and the poor them. They say I know that I greedy, but I beg you don't watch me stop being hateful. Instead just be grateful. All the good them say it's all about me. That's the slogan. The big salary increase is just the latest injustice to be imposed on the people by these blundering misfits. They're selfish and greedy with no love for the needy.